He was born on July 16, 1939, in a 70-square-meter house in the holy city of Mashhad, in northeastern Iran, the second of 8 children in a family so poor that his mother sewed his clothes from his father's discarded old garments, and some nights there was nothing on the table but bread and raisins. He became a cleric at age 11 and began wearing clerical robes that made his schoolmates mock him in the streets. Between 1962 and 1977, he was arrested 6 times, tortured in a secret prison by the Shah's intelligence service, and exiled to a remote desert city at the edge of the country. On June 4, 1989, he stood before the Assembly of Experts and told 86 senior Islamic clerics that he was not qualified for the position they were about to give him. They gave it to him anyway. He held it for 37 years, outlasting every head of state in the Middle East, outlasting the Soviet Union, outlasting 7 American presidents, and outlasting every enemy who had ever underestimated the boy from the one-room house in Mashhad. This is the story of how a child who grew up hungry in a clerical household became the most powerful theocrat of the 20th and 21st centuries. Ali Khamenei began memorizing the Quran at age 4 inside a traditional maktab school in Mashhad, tutored personally by his father, a low-ranking cleric who earned so little that the family regularly survived on bread alone. Mashhad in the 1940s was a city of approximately 200,000 people built around the shrine of Imam Reza, the 8th Imam of Shia Islam, the holiest site in Iran. It was a world saturated in religious authority, clerical hierarchy, and the quiet expectation that the sons of clerics would become clerics themselves. Khamenei did not resist that expectation. He ran toward it. By age 11, he was already wearing clerical robes to school, enduring mockery from classmates who found the sight absurd. He wore them anyway. In 1958, at age 18, he left Mashhad for the first time and traveled to Najaf in Iraq, then the most prestigious center of Shia scholarship in the world, studying under Grand Ayatollah Mohsen al-Hakim and Grand Ayatollah Abu al-Qasim al-Khoi, 2 of the most senior religious authorities in the Shia world. He stayed less than a year. In 1959, he moved from Najaf to the seminary city of Qom in central Iran, a decision that would define the entire direction of his life. It was in Qom that he first sat in the lectures of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a 57-year-old cleric already developing the revolutionary political theology that would eventually upend an entire country. What Khamenei absorbed in Qom was not only jurisprudence, it was the doctrine of wilayat al-faqih, the guardianship of the jurist. Khomeini's argument that Islamic clerics had not only the right but the obligation to govern directly, that religious authority and political power were inseparable, and that any government that denied this was illegitimate by definition. Khamenei was 20 years old. He studied under Khomeini between 1959 and 1964, and in those 5 years he did not merely learn a theology. He adopted a complete architecture for how power should be organized in a Muslim society, and he spent the next 62 years of his life building that architecture into reality. In 1962, the Shah's government announced reforms that included giving women the right to vote and redistributing land from religious institutions. Khomeini publicly condemned both. Khamenei, now 23, joined the protests that erupted across Iran in response. In June 1963, Khamenei was arrested after delivering a speech in Qom directly attacking Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Mass demonstrations followed across Iran. The Shah's security forces killed an estimated 400 protesters in 3 days. Khamenei was arrested for the first time that same year, taken to 𝙎𝙪𝙗𝙨 prison in Tehran, and held for interrogation. He was 24 years old. He was released. He went back to organizing. He was arrested again. Between 1963 and 1977, SAVAK, the Shah's secret intelligence service established in 1957 with direct assistance from the CIA and Israel's Mossad, arrested Khamenei 6 times in total. Each arrest was followed by interrogation, physical abuse, and periods of solitary confinement. In 1964, after preaching against the Shah's policies in Kerman and Zahedan, he was held for 2 months in solitary confinement in Tehran. In 1971, SAVAK shut down his Quranic interpretation class in Mashhad because his lecture on the children of Israel was deemed an insult to the State of Israel, an American ally. His worst and longest imprisonment came in 1975, when he was held at the facility now known as the Ibrat Museum in Tehran, a detention center specifically designed for psychological destruction and forced confessions. He was tortured. He was released. He went back to organizing. In 1976, SAVAK ran out of patience with imprisonment. They exiled him instead, sending him along with his family to Iranshahr, a remote desert town in the southeastern province of Sistan and Baluchistan, approximately 1,800 kilometers from Tehran, at the edge of the country near the Pakistani border. He lived there under surveillance for 3 years. He kept studying, he kept writing, he kept corresponding with Khomeiни's network. The Shah's security apparatus had arrested him 6 times, tortured him, and exiled him to the most isolated corner of Iran, and had succeeded only in producing a man with 15 years of documented grievances, an unbreakable ideological framework, and direct personal loyalty to the one cleric about to bring the entire regime down. On January 16, 1979, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi boarded a plane at Mehrabad Airport in Tehran and left Iran for the last time. He had ruled for 37 years. Within 25 days, on February 1, 1979, Ayatollah Khamenei landed at Tehran's Mehrabad Airport on an Air France Boeing 747, returning from 14 years of exile in Iraq and France to a crowd of approximately 5 million people lining the streets of Tehran. The Shah's 2,500-year Persian monarchy collapsed in 10 days. On February 11, 1979, Iran's military declared neutrality, the imperial government formally dissolved, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was proclaimed. Khamenei, 39 years old, had spent 16 years being arrested, tortured, and exiled for this moment. He did not waste it. Within weeks of the revolution's victory, Khomeini appointed Khamenei to a series of positions that placed him at the center of the new state's construction simultaneously. He served on the Revolutionary Council. He was appointed supervisor of the newly formed Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in December 1979, the paramilitary force that would eventually grow into Iran's most powerful military institution with approximately 125,000 active personnel and control over vast sections of the Iranian economy. He was elected to the First Islamic Consultative Assembly in 1980. He was appointed Friday prayer leader of Tehran, the single most visible public religious platform in the country, giving him a direct weekly audience with hundreds of thousands of worshippers in the capital. He was everywhere at once, and Khamenei trusted him completely. Then, on June 27, 1981, everything nearly ended. Khamenei had just returned from the front lines of the Iran-Iraq War, a conflict that had begun on September 22, 1980, when Saddam Hussein's forces invaded Iranian territory across an 800-kilometer front. He went directly from the front lines to the Abu Zar Mosque in Tehran to lead Friday prayers. After prayers, he began addressing the congregation and taking questions. A young man of medium height with curly hair and a beard placed a tape recorder on the desk directly in front of him and pressed play. After approximately 60 seconds, the device emitted a loud whistling sound. Then, it detonated. The bomb had been placed by a member of the Furqan group, a militant organization opposed to clerical governance of the Republic. The explosion shredded Khamenei's right arm, damaged his vocal cords, and punctured his lungs. A surgeon at the scene initially declared him dead. He was not dead. He was transferred to a hospital and underwent emergency surgery. His right arm was permanently paralyzed. His vocal cords were permanently damaged, leaving him with a deep and distinctive rasp that would become one of the most recognizable voices in the Islamic world for the next 45 years. When he regained consciousness, he told the doctors surrounding him, "I won't need the hand. It would suffice if my brain and tongue work." He learned to write with his left hand. Within months, he was back in public. In October 1981, Khamenei ran for president of the Islamic Republic. He won with 95% of the vote and took office as Iran's third president on October 13, 1981, at age 42. He was re-elected in 1985 with an equally overwhelming mandate. His 8 years as president were conducted entirely under the shadow of the Iran-Iraq War, a conflict that killed an estimated 500,000 Iranians between 1980 and 1988, consumed approximately 30% of Iran's annual national budget at its peak, and ended on August 20, 1988, with a UN-brokered ceasefire that Khamenei described as drinking a cup of poison. Khamenei managed Iran's civilian government throughout those 8 years, while Khamenei retained supreme authority, a relationship that taught him precisely how total power was structured, maintained, and protected from challenge. On June 3, 1989, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini died of heart failure at the age of 86, after 10 years as the founding supreme leader of the Islamic Republic. He left no clearly designated successor. The Assembly of Experts convened an emergency session on June 4, 1989. 86 senior Islamic clerics gathered to select the second supreme leader in the history of the Islamic Republic, a position with constitutional authority over the military, the judiciary, state media, nuclear policy, and foreign relations, the most concentrated formal power structure in the Middle East. Multiple names were discussed. The session lasted hours. When the vote was taken, Ali Khamenei, a man who had publicly stated 24 hours earlier that he lacked the religious qualifications for the position, received the majority. He accepted. He was 49 years old, had survived 6 arrests, 1 assassination attempt that should have killed him, and 8 years managing a wartime government. He had spent 30 years preparing for a position he publicly claimed he did not want. What he did with it over the next 37 years would reshape the entire Middle East. For 37 years after June 4, 1989, Ali Khamenei exercised a form of power that had no equivalent in the modern world. He controlled Iran's military, its judiciary, its nuclear program, its state media, and its foreign policy from a single office, outlasting 7 American presidents, the Soviet Union, the Arab Spring, 4 Iranian presidents, and every domestic movement that tried to remove him. He built the Axis of Resistance, an Iran-led network of armed proxy forces stretching from Hezbollah in Lebanon to Hamas in Gaza to the Houthis in Yemen, a strategic architecture designed to project Iranian power across the Middle East without committing Iranian soldiers directly. By 2024, that network had become the most consequential non-state military infrastructure on Earth. He also ordered the security forces of the Islamic Republic to shoot protesters in the streets of Tehran. In June 2009, when millions of Iranians poured into the streets after a disputed presidential election, Khamenei stood before Friday prayers and told the nation the result was legitimate and the protests must stop. They did not stop. His security forces arrested thousands, killed dozens, and tortured detainees in facilities not unlike the ones Savak had once used on him. In 2022, when 22-year-old Mahsa Amini died in the custody of Iran's morality police and the Woman Life Freedom movement erupted across all 31 of Iran's provinces, his response was identical. Crackdown, arrests, bullets. He had spent the first 40 years of his life being the man the state imprisoned. He spent the last 37 years being the state that did the imprisoning. On February 28, 2026, at approximately 4 a.m. Tehran time, a joint United States and Israeli airstrike destroyed his compound in the Iranian capital. He was 86 years old. Iranian state television confirmed his death and declared 40 days of national mourning. On the streets of several Iranian cities, people celebrated. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, was subsequently appointed as the new supreme leader, inheriting a country under siege, an economy hollowed out by 46 years of sanctions, and a population that had been told for 37 years that all of it was worth it. The boy from the one-room house in Mashhad had survived 6 arrests, 1 bomb, 5 decades of geopolitical war, and 7 American presidents. He had transformed a defeated and exiled revolutionary movement into the dominant ideological force across the modern Middle East. He had also built a system so thoroughly fused with his own personal authority that the moment he died, no one inside it knew what came next. That is what power without accountability always produces in the end. Not a legacy, a vacuum.